Alrighty, this is going to be our final example. So we're going to take a look at how we can use just a handful of those operators together to make some interesting behavior. And I want to go ahead and implement a drag drop. And I want to do it without using, jQuery UI or any sort of plugin or any sort of library. I want to do it with straight up reactive extensions. And it's going to be a lot simpler than you think, although it is a good example because in some parts of it might challenge you a little bit. And I think that's good. Some of the syntax might look a little weird. Some of the things that we're doing might look a little strange. I highly encourage you to follow along and try it out and work on it and break it down to little pieces and try to identify which each little piece does. But let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to come up here to my HTML file and I'm going to copy and paste it and I'm going to rename it. We really didn't use a whole lot of these HTML files in this course. Drag drop. And then the source client, I'm going to create a new file called example03 drag drop.js. And then in my HTML file, I'm going to go ahead and import o3 drag drop. Then I'm going to go ahead and open up my web server. So I'm going to say cd public live server. And that'll open up my web server. And come over here. And now we have o3 drag drop, and we can click on that. And we can open our console, because often that's what we're going to want to do. All right, it did not find the JavaScript file, so let's go ahead and I'm going to move this to the side, because we're going to be working with HTML and JavaScript. Didn't find this, unfortunately, and now it did. Okay, I just needed to have that built. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is, or maybe move that over there. First thing we're going to do is we're going to write our HTML. And for the HTML, and CSS, by the way, the basic HTML is going to look like this. We're going to have a class, or class draggable with an ID of drag, and it's going to be a div. Then we're going to have a UL with 6 LIs, and we'll have a drop area 1 and a drop area 2. And a drop area 3, and why can't I just copy and paste that? 4, 5, 6. And then I'm going to go ahead and give all of these a class of drop area. I could have done that with the shortcut I used earlier, but I'll just do it this way. Drop area. Okay, so we have our HTML. Now let's go ahead and write our CSS. So we're going to have some CSS up here. Now, the CSS is going to be important, and you'll see why in a moment because of the way we're going to implement this. We need a draggable. Draggable will have a transition of, yeah, I'm getting fancy, background 250 ms, background of AAA, a width of 30 pixels, a height of 30 pixels, a position. What did I do wrong? I missed a colon. A position of absolute, a cursor of move, a border of 5px solid 444, a top of 0, and a left of 0. Then we're also going to have draggable.dragging. And draggable.dragging is going to have a background of 555. And importantly, it's going to have a pointer events of none. Now, what pointer events does is it prevents the browser from recognizing that any pointer event is happening to this object. And we need it so that when we, the way we're going to detect these drop areas is by using the mouse over and mouse out events on these. So we need those events to fire even when we're dragging this over them. And so that's why it's important we set the pointer events to null or none. Then I'm going to do drop area. For the drop area, we'll also do a transition of background 250 milliseconds, a padding of 10 px, a background of my favorite blue color, and if you've seen any of my other courses, you'll know that this is my favorite blue color, and then a margin of 10 px 0 and a color of FFF. And then we also want a drop area dot dropped, and drop area dropped will have a background of a nice yellow. So that's FEE200 and a color of black. So now if we come over here into our page, we'll see that our stuff is indeed styled. But obviously it doesn't do anything yet. And it doesn't do anything because we haven't written any JavaScript to, well, do anything with. So let's fix that. To start off, we are going to import jQuery from jQuery. We're going to import Rx from RxJS Rx. And then we're going to get references to all of our items. So I'm going to say money drag equals elements with an ID of drag. Money document equals wrapping our document in jQuery. And then our drop areas is going to be drop area. Then I'm going to create a couple observables. I'm going to say begin drag money equals Rx observable, there we go, from event drag mouse down. Const end drag is going to be Rx observable from event document mouse up. And then const mouse move is going to be Rx observable from event document mouse move. So we have these three event streams, these three hot observables. One for beginning the drag, which results in us clicking on the drag element. Our end drag, which happens when our mouse goes up from the document, and our mouse move, which happens when our mouse moves in the document. Of course, they don't do anything yet, but we have these streams to work with. So let's go ahead and do our drops. So I'm going to say const drops equals begin drag dot do, e goes into e dot prevent default. Remember, begin drags is going to return an event. We want to prevent default, and we also want to do drag dot add class dragging. Then I want to go ahead and say merge map into start event. Remember, I'm grabbing the start event out of the thing. Merge map start event, and it's going to be return mouse moves dot take until end drag dot do mouse event goes into move drag, and this will be a function we'll create in a second. Start event move event or mouse event, sorry. And then we'll say last, and then we'll leave it there. And then at the end we'll say do drag dot remove class dragging dot animate top 0 left 0 250. Then we're simply going to say drops subscribe and drop area. We haven't gotten the drop area out yet, but we are going to. So I'll go ahead and just say that, and I'll console log out drop area. Okay, now we just need to do move drag. Move drag is just going to be a simple helper method that takes in a start event where we started moving and our move event. And it's simply, or let's go ahead and rename that to move event. I think that's better. There we go. And we simply do drag.css, and we say left is going to be mouse or move event client x minus start event offset x, and our top is going to be move event client y minus start event client y. So the reason why we're keeping track of our start event, remember the event, the begin drag event that started this whole thing, the reason we're keeping track of it is because it has this offset y and whoops, that should be offset y. It has this offset x and offset y parameters, which tell us where on the element we clicked. So that means as we move around the element, it'll be offsetted by where we initially clicked on it, and that'll give us a nice UI. I know we haven't yet written the code to extract which drop area we're over, but at the very least, we should be able to come over here and drag the guy around. And we do. And then at the end, it jumps all the way back to the beginning. And for our, what we're getting is we're getting the final mouse move. That's the thing that's being emitted. That's not what I want to have emitted. I want to have the drop area that we were over be emitted as the final thing in this whole workflow. But before we do that, let's just look at this code. It's really straightforward. It might look a little scary, but that's okay. I just encourage people to really type this out and try to internalize it. So again, we start off by aliasing out a bunch of these elements into jQuery objects. We create a bunch of hot event streams. And then we hook into the begin drags, which is mouse down on drag. Then we perform a side effect, and that's simply preventing default for E so we don't start dragging around the page and selecting text. And then we add the dragging class to our drag element. Then we merge map. We extract the start event, the event that started the whole drag, and we return mouse moves.takeUntil and drag. Now that should be fairly straightforward. We're now looking at the mouse moves observable, and we want to take those moves until the end drag observable produces an event, in which case will happen when document mouse up gets fired. And then we perform a side effect of moving and dragging around the element by calling our move drag function. And then we simply take the last element out of that whole thing. So remember, last is going to prevent any item from being sent to our subscription until this whole sequence completes. So we're effectively paused inside of this merge map before any other piece of code is going to execute. And that's really cool. And then that merge map is going to merge that last event into the stream and then go forward and perform the side effect, this do side effect, which simply removes the dragging class and animates it back to the top left corner of the screen. So how do we get the current area that our mouse is over when we perform the drag? Well, we can use, so I'm saying const current over area equals Rx observable merge, and we're going to merge on Rx observable from event drop areas mouse over map E goes into money E target followed by Rx observable from event drop areas mouse out dot map E goes into null. So again, this is thinking of something that's, you typically think about this imperatively, imperatively. You think about this in terms of, okay, I need to register a mouse over event, and then if something's over, then I have to store it in a local variable, and then if it's out, I have to set it back to null. Flip that thinking around and think of it in terms of events. So we merge together mouse over events, and the mouse over events are going to produce a jQuery object that points to the element that the mouse was over. And then the mouse outs are going to produce null. So how do we query this this hot observable before our last, or after our last rather? Because what I want to do is I want to return the current value of current over area after our take until is done. So after this last. Well, that's simple. We simply do dot with latest from current over areas, and then pass in a function that takes in two parameters, with the second being the area, and then return the area. So now we're with latest from current over area. We're ignoring the first event, or the first parameter, which is going to be the move event. We don't care about the move event anymore, at least. We used to care about the move event, but now we don't. So I just use an underscore to denote parameters that I'm not interested in using. And then the second parameter is going to be what was merged in from current over areas. And then our selector simply returns that area object. So now if I come back here and we refresh, if I go ahead and open the console and drag and drop it all the way over here, we get null. But if I drop it over here into drop area 3, look at that. We now get drop area 3. So what do we want to do when we subscribe to this? We simply want to say drop areas, remove class. What did I call that again? That class dropped. Dropped. And then drop area, add class, dropped. Come back here, drag over to 4, and 4 is hovered, is colored. Area 1 is colored now, and drop area 6, and 5, and 2, and so on. And if I move it out to null, of course, cannot do add class of null. I should add a null check here. I should say if drop area. Maybe move that onto one line. So now if I do 3, but then move outside of 3, 3 is no longer dropped on. Obviously, we can perform whatever other functionality we might want to do here. In regards to dragging and dropping, that's up to you. That's an implementation detail. This is the code that does it, and it's 40 3 lines of code. And that's excluding the 14 lines of code that were just for importing our stuff and aliasing out, or whoops, 10 lines of code that was just aliasing out hot streams, hot observables, and different jQuery elements as well as our imports. Also, an interesting thing to note, because of the behavior of observables, when our take and tell end drag is done, and our last is done, we will unsubscribe automatically from mouse moves and end drags. So these guys, once they're done and finished and completed, will become unsubscribed. So we're no longer receiving those events. So that's a really cool thing. Reactive extensions will clean up after itself. If you're no longer using something, it's going to go ahead and unsubscribe from that event handler. And, you know, that's just clean code, that's performant, but you don't have to worry about it. All you have to worry about is using your observable until you're done with it. And then when you're done with it, make sure you unsubscribe for anything that you might be subscribed to, and you're finished. So again, the logic here is really straightforward. We begin drag, we merge map in, mouse moves, take and tell end drag. That's I think that reads very well. Of course, I spent a lot of time looking at code like this, and I really, my goal here for you guys is to go out and start practicing this and applying this sort of paradigm to your own projects, and seeing how far you can get by using observables. But yeah, stuff and things. I think that wraps up the final example of this course. So I hope you enjoyed this drag drop example. And we'll see you in the next video.